Sense.
I have some other stuff that is completely unrelated. Bryan Callen.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so you saw this. You know this. Bryan Callen, fighter and the kid,
Yep.
had MeToo allegations.
Yep.
Unlike other people, he immediately came out with a statement that unequivocally denied everything. Said this is patently not true. Also said, I'm not going to go away, and there will be a live stream this Saturday. So a couple of interesting things that have happened from this. One, I get his intention, I think, was to not shrink away. What ultimately happened is that the live stream did not materialize. The Fighter and the Kid podcast now has a new host, and he has started a new podcast with Brendan Schaub, his old host, that is behind a paywall on Patreon. So I don't know what advice lawyers give in these types of situations, and I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but let's presume for a moment that he is earnest in his belief that none of this is true, earnest in his desire to not let it affect him, but clearly has had to take serious steps away from the public eye.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to make of it, honestly. I'm not really sure what goes on when you're in that kind of a circumstance, but I don't know if you have any thoughts or...
No, I'm not. Listen, I've never had to go through anything nearly as stressful or difficult. If it is the case that the allegations are false, obviously it's been very life-affecting for him. So I'm not saying that he's doing it wrong, but it's not what I expected when he said, I'm not going to shrink. You know what I mean? I expected he'd just be back on his podcast, sitting next to his co-host, talking, maybe talking about it, maybe saying, listen, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to live my life because this shouldn't have happened. And that's what I thought he would do. Certainly did not think he would then make a separate thing that's got a much smaller audience and go behind a paywall.
Yeah, and it seems that the paywall, it seems like that is to dissuade not the LA Times who published the article, because they'll pay
trolls.
$5 a month. It's to pay.
It's to just get rid of the trolls.
crowdfunded army, or the crowdsourced army of people who are going to grab clips, smash them together, and do that sort of work, if you'll call it as much.
Yeah.
So I don't totally understand the logic behind it. I don't know what happens. It's such a weird limbo because
I've never really understand. So apparently the legal advice you get is to go away. So like Chris D'Elia got accused of soliciting underage women, adamantly denies that it happened. I have no idea if it happened or not, but he's saying this didn't happen. But apparently his lawyers say, stop doing your podcast, stay out of the limelight, just let it blow over. That seems like not intuitive to me.
Well, Chris D'Elia had a very different response than Bryan Callen. Chris D'Elia was essentially, this isn't true. I regret some things I've done in my life. And so I'm going to be taking time away. So I don't know to what he was referring, but I do get the sense that he wanted to be less prominent. I don't know that he legally did anything wrong, but he seemed to think that increased exposure might, this is my interpretation of it, might lead to further stories which might be, in I guess his eyes, more true than the first ones that had come out. That was my limited, don't know the guy read on it.
Yeah.
It's such a strange thing because let's assume a world that is a bit of black and white in Bryan Callen's case. Either he did what this woman said or intimated, which was that she was drugged and raped despite having said no.
Yeah. Which would be terrible.
Which would be awful. And then there's this other world, which is very different, which is that Bryan Callen did not drug her, had consensual sex, which did not involve the saying of no. And these are two very, very different accounts of what appears to be a singular encounter.
Yeah.
Now, it's possible that both parties totally believe their version of the story, right? That's possible. But I think it is less possible that both happened.
Yeah. It's impossible. It's impossible that both happened.
So someone has done a bad thing, right? Someone has done a seriously bad thing. Either party, whether they recognize it or not, has committed rape or accused someone falsely of committing rape. And it seems like, unfortunately, where you can't get to the bottom, what just kind of happens is like a stalemate, slink away. Like both parties just kind of step back, which is such a weird justice compromise. And I don't have a better solution than it, because how do you determine those sorts of things? But it is strange to think that, like, look, I don't know if it was malicious, but or if both of you totally believe what you're saying, then maybe it's not malicious at all. But somebody's done something bad here, and there is no punishment and there is no adjustment that is occurring that is commensurate with the two seemingly plausible ways that the bad thing got done.
Right, because if he did it, then you would think the penalty should be worse than just going behind a paywall.
Getting a new podcast.
Yeah,
yeah.
And if he didn't do it, then you would think there should be some sort of penalty for making up the accusation.
Yes.
And I think the other thing is this happened 21 years ago, and it's
so there's no way. Yeah.
Well, it's also just very possible that the truth is somewhere in the middle. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying this is the case, but I do think I was kind of framing that as if this is the case. But there's this weird middle potential for 21 years have passed. Memories of the same event might be different, and I'm going to completely go off the rails and speculate. I think Bryan would probably have remembered roofing someone's drink, or that being a thing, because that's a compound stage of things. He could be outright lying.
Yes, he could be outright lying, but I'm going to craft a scenario in which both parties are sincere in what they're saying. Bryan does not roofie her. She does feel a little bit tipsy and out of sorts because she had a drink and didn't eat or something.
Sure, they went out for 3 drinks.
They have sex. She feels uncomfortable about it. She expresses her discomfort. He says something like it's okay, assumes that she then feels okay because she then subsequently says things like yes or whatever. And then they part having initially slightly different takes on what happened, and as their lives carry them in 21 years of different directions, very different senses of what happened. I'm not saying that that's what happened, but I'm trying to find a world where people aren't bald-faced lying in ways that are convincing. Because quite frankly, when I watch Bryan Callen talk, it is convincing. And when you imagine that this woman had to work up the courage to go to the LA Times, sit down and tell this story, it seems ludicrous that it would come from a bald-faced, like, psychopathic lie. So I'm trying to understand this world where we don't have a psychopath in this scenario. We have two people that how does this happen? So this is me spitballing, but I don't know if that's the case. Then even how do you sort through these things?
Yeah, well, the tricky part is if you could get to that real truth, that if you could just get a video of what actually happened.
Well, this is where philosophy starts to come. This real truth. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. So if you could get a third party truth, let's say. Someone's not involved.
Her friend or his friend?
No, a camera. A camera.
What angle?
That just followed them that followed their date the whole time.
How close is it to her mouth when she whispers no? I mean, I'm telling you, there is no third party truth.
No, but you could certainly get more of a consensus. Because right now the world is split into two things. People who think Bryan Callen is an innocent man who is wrongly accused, and people who think that Bryan Callen is a total scumbag.
And 99% of people have never heard this.
Yeah. And I think you could get closer to a middle ground if the camera had been there.
Yes, but I think we've talked about this. Yes, I think it would be better if there's a camera there. I'm not going to fight you on that one at all. I'm not going to fight you on that. But what I would say is that even a camera doesn't allow for two very different interpretations. For instance, say that she says no at a level that the camera picks up, but he doesn't because he's hard of hearing. I don't,
Sure.
And says it in a way like there's
Well,
still
also,
room for very different understandings of the same event, even with the camera present.
Yes, certainly there's also a world where someone goes, we shouldn't do this. I have a boyfriend. And the guy goes, I know. And then they kiss passionately and then their clothes come off and it's not forceful at all.
Yeah.
But like that has been spoken.
Yes.
And you go, okay, well, what is that?
So we're deep into the land of speculation, but I think that the reason that we're speculating is for exactly what I said, which is there's all of these allegations, and while it is possible that you have some combination of psychopathic rapists that are just totally lying about what they did in the past from an understanding level, or psychopathic accusers that are trying to destroy people's lives for personal vendettas.
And by the way, some people will fall into both of those categories.
And some are. There's definitely one of each at least.
Yeah.
All right,
For sure.
We can think of some names
For sure. And then most people are in the middle.
Yeah, and to be clear, it sounds like Bill Cosby was on the psychopathic rapist side.
Sure.
And it sounds like the girl at UVA who concocted a story and admitted to it to the Rolling Stone later, was on the side of making crazy stuff up. So we do know that both of these things can occur.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what percentage fall in that misunderstanding middle ground. And then within misunderstandings, there's misunderstandings that are more understandable and misunderstandings that are less like, okay, you're going to say you didn't hear or say no. You're going to say, like, all of that kind of stuff complicates it further. It is the difficult nature of legislating, solving crimes, and doling out punishment decades after the fact to a thing that only two people were present to.
There's also, I mean, the truth is we as a society are very confused about what is and isn't okay. Like, I have dated somebody where in the past she's like, I want to have sex. And I'm like, I don't want to have sex tonight. And then she'll grab my genitals, get me aroused, get me hard, and then I'll consensually have sex with her.
Yeah.
Did she do something wrong? We were dating. We'd had sex before. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. I don't know. I'm not here to actually say. But I'm just saying we're not clear on a society as to what that is. And if you polled the U.S., it would not be 100% survey. It wouldn't say 100% and 0 or even 90-10. And that's an event that has happened in my life, right?
I remember talking to you about it the next day. I was like, did you want to have sex with her? You're like, no, I did not. Did you? You're like, yeah, I like her and I care about her, but I didn't want to. And I was like, did you say no? You're like, yeah, I did. I was like, did you stop her? You're like, I physically removed her hand several times. She thought it was cute to continue, in that way. And I've actually...
And by the way, she thought that I was like being
playful
or something.
Playful. I've been in the same...
And this is someone this is someone I was dating. We had sex.
There will be no allegation on Ben's part.
Uncountable times.
Yeah,
I didn't feel taken advantage of. I'm just saying she certainly persisted until I was persuaded.
Yeah.
But mid-sex, listen, she's also 110 pounds. Like mid-sex, I could have stopped her at any time.
Yeah.
So at some point you have to say that I had consented in the sense that, like, she couldn't physically take advantage of me.
And that's, of course, different. And
what she did was she put, like, emotional... I don't want to say like, what's a gentler word for coercion? Like, she, like, leaned on me emotionally until I gave her what she wanted.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that I was a victim at all. Actually, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is if you explain that story to people, we're unclear on what that is. You know what I'm saying? And so when a lot of hooking up falls into that category where it's not the strictest sense of written consent, right? Most hookups don't occur by saying, hey, how's it going? How's your night? It's good. Would you like to have sex tonight? Yeah, I would love to. Awesome. Shake hands and then have sex. So then everything less than that is some shade of gray.
Yeah. Well, we can cut this if you want, 100%, because if we haven't done a good enough job of anonymizing this person. But one of the interesting things about the story that you told was that person had previously shared with you an experience in their life of having a boyfriend that... Yeah.
Can I tell the story since I don't want to whisper down the lane it?
Sure.
So her story was that she and a boyfriend, when they were both 19, and I'll get some of these details wrong because I haven't seen this person in a while. But the story, as far as I remember it, is they both got drunk. Like no one was roofied, no one was forced to drink. They both got themselves drunk and then went into the woods and had sex. And she then got alcohol poisoning because she had drank so much. But this was her boyfriend. They'd had sex a bunch before, and also they were both drunk. She went to the hospital, got her stomach pumped, felt fine about it afterwards. It was like, I didn't feel like I'd been date raped or taken advantage of. And then her friends were saying how wrong it was that he had sex with her when she was that drunk. But he was shit-faced too. And I mean, I don't know.
It was college and they decided to do this.
Yeah, they were 19. And I don't know to what extent he knew how drunk she was. You know what I mean? Certainly, again, myself, I have walked around parties fine until the moment I threw up. I hold my alcohol very weirdly. I black out and carry on conversations. I don't drink that much anymore. But in college, you could have talked to me for 20 minutes and I wouldn't even remember seeing you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I don't know how much he thought she had drank or whatever it was, but then her friends basically, she now believes that she was taken advantage of. Yeah. And I asked her, did you think that in the moment? Did you think that afterwards? She said, no, it was upon reflection. And my question to her was, why didn't you take advantage of him? Because he was also absolutely plastered.
Yeah.
And she didn't really have a good answer and it got uncomfortable. And because I was close to her and I didn't want to trigger her or make her feel negative feelings, I just went, okay, this is not a mystery. We have to get to the bottom of it.
It was just interesting that later when that happened and you're like, just so you know, I think you had this conversation. You're like, I said no several times that I didn't want to do this.
Yeah. denied you more than he.
Yeah.
Then you denied him, and you feel like a victim, and I don't think that I'm a victim.
She was very not receptive to that feedback.
She didn't fight it. She didn't like it, but she didn't say I was wrong.
Okay. So, and I'm not saying this is a single individual, but the point that you're making is one that I'm just trying to establish with the anecdotal evidence, I suppose, is that as a culture, we have never sat down and really gotten clear as like, what is consent? When does it occur? How do both parties know? What happens if there is a perception of consent on one side and not on the other side? Like, how does this all get handled?
Yeah.
And also, how does the fact of the very private nature of these encounters that are often with two people with such physical differences between them weigh into this, which is huge because as you said, you're like, I knew that at any point, if I really didn't want something to happen from a physical standpoint, my safety was not in danger.
Oh yeah, that's why I say I'm really not a victim here.
Yeah.
Because basically I was like aggressively persuaded is how I would describe it. Because certainly if I wanted to, I could just remove her from being on top of me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I'm just saying it's an example of something where we're unclear on what that is. And I think that unless you're a major celebrity, very few people are using written consent contracts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so everything else is some form of nonverbal communication. You know, you're kissing someone, your hand goes down towards their pants, and then you see what the reaction is. You know what I mean? And I think that's how 99% of physical interactions occur.
Well, I think it's partially an issue with American Puritanism about sex. So I've traveled in Europe a little bit, and the culture regarding sexual acceptedness in some countries, or at least in my very limited understanding of this in Europe, was much more direct. And there's an interesting book called The Culture Code. And what they try to do is they break down what different concepts like sex and romance mean in different languages. So for instance, the seduction in France, this is important to advertising, which is why this sort of thing existed, because if you do the same ad in the US as you do in France, you will not sell the product. So what they found in France is that the culture code for seduction is a game. It's playful, it's cat and mouse, but it's a game. The culture code in America for seduction is deception. It's lying. And if you think about it, like seduce is not necessarily a positive word in many contexts in America, at least, and that's what these advertisers found as they were researching, is that the way that we approach our understanding of seduction is that there's trickery. And
what's the book called? Culture Code?
The Culture Code. And it had a handful of interesting ones. You know, they did, there's Hummer is about dominance. You know, that was one of the obvious ones. So, and then of course that influences the advertising for Hummer, which is, it's just driving over Mother Nature.
Yeah. Nothing can stop it.
Nothing can stop.
It's just running over deer.
Yeah. And that appeals to that's in America, to a particular culture. But if you were to do a Hummer in France, the Culture Code, I forget what it is, but you can imagine that the Culture Code for Hummer might be like asshole or something.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Or maybe it's like the only way you can sell it is to show how many kids you can fit in it.
Yes.
It's like a family thing. You're like, listen, if you have 7 kids, you need a Hummer.
Yes. So anyway, the point that I'm making is that I do think that there's something American about the fact that we are not direct, and many other cultures are like this, about sex. It is taboo. It is not discussed. You're not supposed to want it. It's a thing, like you said, it's nonverbal, and it's all this physical stuff, which is, that varies from culture to culture.
Yeah, and it varies person to person.
Yeah, person to person.
Not every woman is like this.
Sure.
But like certainly there are women in the U.S. where you could be kissing them, they could be turned on, they could want things to go further, but if you said, hey, I know this is totally random, could I finger you right now? They would be like, you've totally killed the mood here for me.
Yeah.
And not all of them. Some women would be like, hey, I really appreciate you asking.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the majority. I don't know.
I haven't done a study.
I'm not gonna. Yeah, sure. I won't even speculate. But that's not, I think, how most interactions go between men and women.
So,
and
all
vice versa,
this to
by the
say,
way, same thing.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of women handle their seduction that way in the U.S.
And this is I don't have the solution, man. Now there is a solution that is proposed by people like Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, et cetera, which is don't have sex until you're in a committed relationship, where it's been explicitly and implicitly encouraged in those relationships. But even then, I don't think it solves all of the problems like the one that you described, which is I don't want to do it tonight.
Well,
you know?
also, who's that guy from that '70s show? He had some
Stop.
allegations. He had some allegations that like some brutal stuff happened while he was in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Like being in a relationship does not absolve sexual violence.
Yeah, it doesn't solve it. I guess what it solves are these college drunken, what do we do, like bacchanalia scenarios. But yeah, it doesn't get rid of it. So what has to happen? I don't have a solution, unfortunately. I just know that the problem is poorly framed, and it has not been. The complexity of it, I don't think, has been dealt with, quite frankly. So that's all. That's what I got for Bryan Callen.
No, yeah, I have no idea. It's the truth. I have no idea if he's a good guy or a terrible guy. Never met him. I met him once, actually. It was nice to me, but it doesn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, that's the truth. That story comes out, and you just go, okay, well, she says it went one way. He says it went another way. No one has any evidence, and we will never actually know.
Yeah. So the last thing, do you have anything else on your list?
Yeah, I got tons of stuff.
All right. Well, you can go. Hope that you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to see more like this and have us do more podcasts, we are 100% funded by our generous patrons. And if you'd like to contribute, there's a link in the description, and we'll have one pop up on the screen right here so that we can do more podcasts where we have fun conversations and hopefully some deep ones like this. Either way, hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.